this is a it's a tricky question because in a way it's easy one to answer and at the same time a nearly impossible one to answer. The simple answer is what what can be done and what is being done. Well, first of all, a lot is the answer to what can be done. Uh, and the answer to what is being done, not enough. That's the short answer. Yeah. Now we have to break. We read this is. I mean, this is a question that you really have to break down. And you could spend a huge amount of time trying to, really kind of going into details on this. Let me say a few things about what can and is being done, and perhaps what should happen. I spoke earlier about the need to be honest about real barriers to doing business on the continent, real barriers to deploying capital, especially at scale on the continent. Yeah, it is there are just realities that have to be addressed, and whenever we have this conversation, we're looking at climate change and climate action here today. But it doesn't matter what aspect of economic development, what aspect of investment you're talking about when it comes to the African context. There is just a basic need to improve the levels of governance, and much more importantly, and I don't want to sound like I'm reciting some Western playbook here talking about governance. That's not my point. The point is about the implementation of proper policies, the formulation and implementation of effective policies, effective reforms. It's, there's really no secret here. This is something that we are eternally debating, and anybody who's honest with themselves kind of understands it, that we have a bit of a deficit when it comes to, walking the walk on the policy side in Africa. There are lots of good ideas, great initiatives, very, very well thought out, meticulous plans, which all too often, unfortunately, kind of stumble when it comes to the implementation phase. Regional integration, I think, is an example of that. So, at a very basic level, what can be done, what must be done, is you just have to, stop the talking, start the walking in terms of policies and implementation of those policies. Another thing that can be done, and actually before I move on, and look, there are obviously things that are being done, steps that are being taken to move the needle, and specifically on climate action. In September, we had the first ever Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi. And that for me, in many ways, was a kind of quite a landmark moment, in that it for the first time demonstrated a sort of coherence and unity of purpose amongst African leaders, amongst the public and private sector, when it comes to getting serious about the need to meaningfully drive climate action. That is a really positive sign, I think. It's never happened before, and it speaks to a tremendous amount of work that has been done, in recent years, is underway now, and the growing realization and acceptance and seriousness amongst policymakers, amongst people in business, about the need to really make things happen. So, there are things. Things are definitely happening now. The test, of course, is what's going to happen after the summit. What happens when everyone goes back home? Who is going to follow through? What is actually going to be delivered? And there, we should definitely not be cynical or pessimistic about the outlook. But I think we have to be very vigilant, and we have to make sure that the words that come out of things like the Africa Climate Summit, the pledges that come out of that they don't remain in the realm of words and pledges, that they actually turn into tangible action. And depending on what part of the continent you're looking at, there are also countries doing really interesting things in terms of driving renewable energy. Kenya being a case in point. Kenya, I think, now generates over 90% of its energy from renewables, and there's a target to hit 100% by the end of the decade, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. Countries like Morocco are investing heavily in renewable energy. Egypt is investing massively in developing renewable energy, and not just your sort of familiar types of renewables like solar and hydro, but they're pumping a lot of money into things like green hydrogen and green ammonia. Places like Namibia are kind of below radar, but very interesting things going on there. And you could go on. I think the point here is that things are happening. We need a lot more, and we need to move a lot faster. That's the kind of the long and short of it. And then one more thing I to say, and it's a little bit related to the first point, is this issue of the narrative. And I think this is where occasions like the Africa Climate Summit are important. Because in the imagination of too many people globally, not everyone, mind you, this is also important. It's not as though the world has some homogenous view of Africa. There are parts of the world that have a much more nuanced understanding of the continent, and don't come with a lot of the conventional and received wisdom. However, there are still a lot of people in important places, important parts of the world, that have an antiquated perspective about Africa as a place that is, as I alluded to earlier, is kind of helpless. It's just kind of this helpless victim in the face of climate change. All we can do is wait for the world to help us, and that's simply not the case. And all you have to do, I'll say it again, is look at what happened in Nairobi in September, the summit there, the momentum from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt last year, the momentum that's not going to go into COP28. What you're looking at is a continent that is getting serious and getting its act together. Very important. Long story short, we need to see a lot more of this. And if we can, keep up the pace and build momentum, good things will happen.